Welcome to Is Anybody Listening to Me podcast with Azar and the Meat. This is our special Christmas edition episode. It's been a while and we have so much to catch up on. We are very excited. We're going to be doing our usual set of topics, but we're going to just tell you right now, if you're a fan of The Mandalorian, this is going to be your episode. We're going to give you a full download, not about the episode itself entirely, but what it means and what the future holds for the Star Wars franchise. So this is going to be a very educational podcast for you. So let me welcome my partner, Big Meat. How's it going? Merry Christmas.
Going well. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Hopefully we'll squeeze, depends on how many more podcasts we squeeze in here before the New Year's break. But this is going to be a geeky Star Wars talk about the Mandalorian episode. Of course, we'll want to give the caveat that it is a spoiler-filled episode. We want to just be able to speak freely and talk about characters and talk about what happened. So if you haven't seen The Mandalorian, Jarvis, who is not with us today, certainly don't listen to this podcast. Watch The Mandalorian first, then come back. We will answer all the questions that you have. I've actually been given the season quite a bit of thought lately to Azar. So I think I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I think I have it all figured out.
Good. I'm looking forward to that. And I think what we talked about before this podcast, because people are like, well, it's been a while. Why have you guys? Well, we're taking some time because we're just kind of revamping a little bit, same format, but we're going to go a little bit deeper into things. A lot of times we give you guys a lot of topics, but we're going to kind of narrow things down. We're going to go and do our little tangents, especially depending on how much Big Meat is drinking. We might go on big tangents, but we're going to dive in, and we thought The Mandalorian is a perfect stepping stone. But another important topic is like drinking. We just always talk about different boozes, but we never really get into it. And it got me thinking because Big Meat is a big Manhattan expert. He goes around to so many different bars, and he's like a connoisseur of Manhattans. And he'll tell you where the best Manhattan is in the area if you're in the middle of Merrimack Valley.
Making me sound like an alcoholic.
Oh, well, that's just assumed by now if anybody's listened to the podcast before. So that's just assumed. But I guess what I wanted to start off, because you are the expert, and I was surprised over the summer when I ordered a Manhattan, I saw it on the menu, because most nice places have a Manhattan on the menu. People looked at me like, how old are you? Like, why would you be drinking a Manhattan? And I feel like it's kind of got a bad reputation. It really isn't an old man drink like what people are thinking. At least I don't think so, because it's such a popular drink.
I think it used to be that way. I think it used to. It had that stereotype to it that like your grandmother that's the drink that she orders when the family goes out to a restaurant. I think that's how it was. I think times have changed though. I don't think of it as much. I remember 20 years ago or so, right, when we first turned 21 and we were allowed to drink. I don't remember seeing a lot of Manhattans on like a drink special menu. I mean, you could order it anywhere, but I never remember that, and also old fashioned as well. I think now you're seeing it. It's a little bit more common. I preferably like to drink it on the rocks. I don't like drinking it as a martini or out of a martini glass. I typically like it on the rocks. So maybe that's probably the difference there, where your grandmother might want to just sip it out of a martini glass. But I get that. I've heard that before too. People say, "Oh, you're drinking a Manhattan." My grandmother used to drink a Manhattan, but I don't think it's that way so much anymore. I think it used to be that way. Yeah, I could be wrong.
But it's funny because I don't know, and again, I could be wrong. There's such a huge selection of bourbons and different whiskeys and stuff out there now. Like there's more like, it's almost like micro breweries of bourbons that are out there. You can find so many different options. I feel like the Manhattan's made a revival because you're not just getting like well liquor making a Manhattan. People are actually using some really good bourbons in these Manhattans. Like when I go to a restaurant and I see it on the menu, it's not some cheap bourbon. It's usually like some really good brand that they're making it with. So, and we just recently experienced at that Greek restaurant, they were using that Greek brandy in their Manhattan, which is a little. So I guess if you're really limiting yourself if you don't actually try to explore it, because there are actually some really good variety of Manhattans. It's not your traditional what you think maybe you've seen on TV or again what your grandmother was drinking. So I think there's
Sure.
there's a lot of good options, and I guess if you were going to explore it, you're going to get into drinking a Manhattan over the holidays. I guess what's the key to a successful Manhattan, Big Me? What do you think is the key? Like, what's the most important thing?
Well, I mean, to go back to kind of what makes an original Manhattan, right? It was typically rye whiskey. And that's kind of my go-to. I go with rye whiskey. You could put bourbon if you prefer, but the original is with rye whiskey. And
Okay.
things are changing, right? That people are using all types of whiskey to make your Manhattan. But the original is one with rye whiskey. Rye is more for its spiciness, whereas bourbon is more for its sweetness. But that's where the sweet vermouth comes in. If you like it sweeter, I guess you could go with bourbon. If you like the spiciness, maybe you go with rye whiskey. I prefer rye, and I prefer bullet rye. I think bullet rye it's just known for its kind of spiciness flavor to it.
Okay.
But again, everybody has their own preference. My personal preference is bullet rye. You get the 2-for-1 ratio there, right? With say 2 ounces of rye whiskey with 1 ounce of sweet vermouth. Throw a couple dashes of the bitters in there. I typically go with the Angostura bitters, but you can go with orange bitter too if you prefer. And then you throw your maraschino cherry in there, and you're good to go. And that's it. Some people like to stir it. Some people like to have it shaken. It's really just a matter of preference. But I typically just like that bullet rye, sweet vermouth. You throw a couple of bitters in there. If you want your garnish, if you're cherry with or without, it doesn't really matter. I typically stir it. I don't really go through the whole shaking process. And for me, it does the job. I'm happy with it.
So, but you didn't narrow it. What's the most important thing? Is it the bourbon?
Oh, I would definitely say the bourbon. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because sweet vermouth is sweet vermouth, right? I mean, there's not really much difference there. Sometimes you can even skip the bitters. Like the bitters just, it's kind of weird. It's like, you pour yourself a glass of a Manhattan, right? You put the bourbon or the rye whiskey in there. You put the sweet vermouth, and then you try to make it a little bit more bitter with the bitters. It's kind of like you're kind of defeating what you're trying to make there. But definitely the whiskey itself is what you want to go with, and typically rye is my choice. So that's probably what makes the drink.
Okay.
Now, of course, if you go out, now you could go out and like we went to that restaurant. You could try different whiskeys. Of course, we've tried our many different types of whiskeys, Azar, but we haven't tried every whiskey. You go to a restaurant and you see it on the menu, like, oh, what kind of whiskey is that? I've never tried that. And you order it with your Manhattan, and all of a sudden you taste it and you're like, ooh, like that gives it an extra flavor. So then that's kind of you're on the hunt for that really good whiskey that you want in your drink.
Yeah, I think I never had Whistling Pig. Right, that's Whistling Pig is the brand, right?
Whistle Pig.
Whistle Pig. I haven't yet. I've yet to buy it. I keep calling it Whistling. But anyways, I saw that and they had a Manhattan with that. That was the first time I actually tried it. I tried it as a Manhattan.
Yeah, I only tried Whistle Pig once, only because they were selling it as a nip, and I bought it for $6. Because if you buy a big bottle of it, it's a little pricey. But you get a little nip just to try it, and I thought it was okay. Yeah. I don't think it's not really worth the cost of it. I don't think.
No, but I agree with you. I see. It's funny. I was wondering if you were going to say bourbon's like everybody buys. I bought the bullet bourbon. I like the sweetness, and I haven't tried the rye, and it's something I'm going to buy a bottle of that next when I finish the bullet bourbon. But I'm just curious. When I was making it, I was thinking when you go to different restaurants, I don't put a lot of ice in my bourbons or when I drink whiskey. And it's funny because now you see these giant balls of ice, giant cubes of ice that just take up the whole glass. And I don't know, do you care for that? I don't know if is it worth having? Because it seems like it would water it down when it's that big of an ice cube.
True, it could water it down. I like to drink my drinks kind of fast, Azar. So,
so it's not a problem for you, is what you're saying?
It's not an issue for me, no.
Okay.
And also typically the sphere ice. And I don't know. I don't really understand the physics behind it. It just melts a lot slower than if you had like cubes of ice in it for whatever reason. It doesn't melt as fast.
Okay.
And so it does. So I do recommend it. Yeah, it looks fancier. A nice ice sphere in there. It's kind of nice.
But you're saying it doesn't really matter because you drink it so fast. It's just really just.
That's true. That's true. And I like it cold. I prefer a drink like even in 0-degree weather. Like I'll get an iced coffee at Dunkin's. You know what I mean? Like I don't think of a drink as it should be hot. Like you shouldn't be drinking like a hot coffee. I don't care how cold it is outside. And that's how I prefer all my drinks. I like them cold.
All right. Well, again, this is going to be we're going into the holidays. If you haven't tried something different, we're just trying to encourage. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but try Manhattan. It isn't what you think it is, and splurge on some of the quality ingredients. Don't go for a cheap bourbon. If you can get the spherical ice cube, go for it. I would highly recommend getting quality cherries. Go to your liquor store, or like if you're near the New Hampshire liquor store, they sell a good variety of the different cherries. The cherry does add some flavor to the drink. Don't go to the ice cream aisle of your market basket and get those cherries and throw them in your drink. It's a little bit different. So
the ones impregnated with sugar and like, unbelievable. I think what they do is they like bleach those cherries. They bleach them so they're like white, and then they dip them into like bright red food coloring and all sorts of other preservatives and shit that's in there. And it's just, I mean, those can't be healthy for you.
Go to your cocktail section and find the right cherries. Don't go cheap. It's just an easy thing, but it can be easily overlooked. You're like, oh, I have cherries for my kids' ice cream sundaes. Don't throw those in there. Like you
don't want those. Those are for ice cream. Leave those for ice creams and Shirley Temples. The maraschino cherry, the ones I get, and there's a lot. There's the Bada Bing. I think you bought a jar of cherries of the Bada Bing. There's a bunch of different kinds.
And they're big. They're big fat cherries. They're good.
They are, but the original maraschino cherries that you want is Luxardo cherries. Those are the best. Those are good. And you could get, they're a little pricey. They get like I think I paid like $18 for like a small jar.
Ooh, living like a big
14-ounce jars. Yeah, but when in Rome. But it's not like, I mean, I bought that jar maybe a year ago. I mean, even if you're making a Manhattan one per week, I mean, it's gonna last. It's gonna last for a while. And you're right, it does make a little bit of a difference. Sometimes you could even put a little bit of the cherry juice in it if you wanted to make it a little bit sweeter. But Luxardo is the best. Now, I should actually recommend, it's not something, or not recommend, I should mention, because this was something that Jarvis challenged me on a while back, because I didn't have any sweet vermouth in the house, and I put dry vermouth in it. Well, he's like, you don't put dry vermouth in a Manhattan. Well, you could, and it's basically called a dry Manhattan. So you could substitute the sweet vermouth with dry vermouth. It's not that good, right? It's not, but it is technically, you could go out and ask for a dry Manhattan. You could also ask for a mixture of sweet and dry vermouth, and that would be called a perfect Manhattan. If you're going to go out to wherever and ask for that. Sure. Now, if you want to take it another step further, and this might be something you might be interested, because you've been drinking your Macallan Scotch lately, Azar. If you put Scotch in it instead of Bullet or Rye, you might have heard the name Rob Roy. That's a Rob Roy, is when you order a restaurant. So again, you can really make it so many different ways. It's just your preference. It's whatever you prefer. If you like Scotch, make it with Scotch. If you like it dry vermouth, if you like sweet vermouth, if you want to mix it up, you could do it.
That's interesting. You know what? Drinking a Scotch, I don't know if I would use an expensive Scotch like that for a Rob Roy, because you're spending that kind of money. You want the quality of the Scotch. You don't want to be wasting it with additional flavors.
You want to drink it straight.
You want to drink it straight. You know what? It might be something worth a try. Or if you're someone that bought a Scotch, you're not very happy with it, and you're looking for a way to get rid of it because you just don't like the taste, make a Rob Roy with it. So that is a good piece of advice. You never know. But I know when you mentioned the cherry juice, that's how my wife likes it. If I make her a Manhattan, I got to put just a little, because she loves cherries. I got to put a little bit of the cherry juice in it in the mix. So, and I do a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 ounces of bourbon to 1 ounce of vermouth. And the recipe I saw, I haven't found orange bitters. So I haven't tried it with orange bitters to see if it makes much of a difference. Because I know I've made like an old fashioned uses the orange slice and the cherry, and you mash them together with the alcohol. So something to try. But again,
and I should say too, like that you mentioned with the garnish as well. It's one thing to remember. There's like a garnish rule, right? It's if you do plan on using dry vermouth, you always garnish it with a lemon for whatever reason. That's just kind of the standard. It's always garnished with a lemon and not with a cherry. So I don't know why. But even if you make like a Rob Roy, if you were to go out and order a Rob Roy with the Scotch, they're not, it's the same proportion, just with a different base. But with a perfect Manhattan, if you're blending the two sweet vermouth and dry vermouth, because you're using even a little bit of dry vermouth, it's always with a lemon and never with a cherry.
Oh, interesting.
That's just, yeah. For whatever reason, that's just one of those garnish rules that bartenders, I guess, have. But,
all right.
But yeah, again, to go back to my preference, again, go with the traditional bullet rye whiskey, sweet vermouth, throw some bitters in there, with or without the cherry. It's you'll enjoy it. You'll get drunk off of it. That's for sure.
Well, Big Meat, you didn't disappoint. You are look at you. You're quite the booze expert here. And now, if someone wants to do it at the holidays with family members, they won't embarrass themselves and put the wrong garnish in and be called the
That's
jackass.
right. That's right. And I should say, I probably should have started the podcast off of this because I've been meaning to get this off my chest. It's been a while since we've done the last podcast, and the last podcast we had Jarvis on. I do have to apologize for my behavior on that last podcast. I partially blame Jarvis because he wasn't angry Jarvis. He was like, I would say, obnoxious Jarvis. And because he was so obnoxious, I felt like I had to out-obnoxious him. So what happened is I started drinking faster. I started drinking more heavily. And before and I was playing him in fantasy that week, so there was already some tension built up there. So I just got sloppy. And quite frankly, Azar, I don't remember much of the podcast after about halfway through it. So that when I listened to it again, I said, oh, I don't remember any of this. I said, this is all kind of new to me. This is actually kind of interesting. I can't wait to hear what I have to say next because I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to say. And hearing it back, I said, oh, yeah, the whiskey was flowing a little bit. Actually, I wasn't even drinking whiskey that day. I think I was just drinking vodka. And it was just going down too fast.
Yeah, you stole your wife's vodka. Yeah,
I did.
She was mad at you.
It was vodka lemonade.
Next time I saw you, she was mad that you drank her bottle of booze.
Yeah,
so,
I did. I drank it all. I blame Jarvis. Partially it's my fault as well. I should have a little bit more control. But I promise this podcast here, I'll be more sober.
So what we learned from it is that because of your drinking, you missed a lot of what you said. So you basically created an episode so you can entertain yourself when you listen back to it. So it wasn't geared for the audience. It was really more for Big Meat. So he gets him drunk so he doesn't remember what he said.
That's right. That's right. It's like, one of these podcasts, I would actually like to just step away, not do the podcast. Maybe it's just you and Jarvis so that I can actually have the enjoyment of listening to like a new podcast. Like I would enjoy that. I would like that.
Well, you know what? That might happen. We might have to do a special episode with just depending on the topic. We got to find the right topic. Jarvis,
as long as Jarvis doesn't get obnoxious about it.
Well, he's going to be a little bit more extra obnoxious after getting eliminated in fantasy, but that's a side topic. We're not going to go down that road heavily today. But all right, let's dive into what got us excited about jumping back into doing a podcast today. The big buzz right now, like a month or so ago, you would say what was the big buzz? Buzz was like, Cobra Kai. Everybody was excited about Cobra Kai and the ending of Cobra Kai. But now we just finished The Mandalorian season 2, just ended. And I think there's a consensus. If I'm not wrong, it's stuff that I've read online, just talking to our friends, talking amongst each other. This has to be the best Star Wars. I know it's a series, but compared to I know you're not supposed to compare a show to a movie, but compared to the movies, this was the best Star Wars product produced. And I heard someone write in their lifetime, and I think that's almost fair because I was so young when Star Wars was created in the 70s. So I was still like, I wasn't really old enough to really appreciate Star Wars as a kid until I got a little bit older, but you weren't watching it in a theater when you were only like 3 or 4 years old or whatever, 5 years old. But I got to say, I have a hard time disagreeing. It probably is the best thing produced since the original franchise came out in the late 70s, early 80s. And that's sad because of how much has come out over the years. And we're saying this little spin-off, little show is the best thing produced with probably a fraction of the budget that was used to create any of those movies, which is amazing to me. So
Yeah, it is hands down the best Star Wars since the original three. And it could just be too because it's on Disney Plus. You're right; it's got a smaller budget, but they kept it simple. It wasn't so over the top. They didn't just rely on special effects and and just watching it on the big screen where you just get blown away by like the fireworks that are going on the big screen. I think they just related it back to the characters and the story, and that's really what it comes down to. Every great show and every great movie that you've watched has a good story behind it. It's got a good plot. The acting is like, whatever. If you're like, it doesn't have to be Oscar worthy, but it's got to be at least believable. And you gotta be able to believe in the characters and root for the characters that are in it. And also, like we've talked about the villain as well. If you have a good villain in it, that's just an extra bonus. That's an extra plus. The Mandalorian has it all. Has got all of that. Yeah, it's not the big budget special effects, but special effects were pretty good. Considering that
for a
it's
show,
for that type of show. Yeah, for an 8-episode season. So yeah, it's great.
yeah. It's interesting because another thing that I liked about it, and I remember at one point in the finale, you had the Mandalorians. There was a scene where all four of the women were marching to the ship, basically taking over the ship.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I leaned over to my wife and I said, it's nice because they didn't focus on this, like they didn't make some corny line that it was all women or something like they did in the Avengers where they want to throw it down your face like this is like a women's cast or women. Like, no, they just left it alone. Like you were rooting for them. You didn't care if they're women. You're watching it. There was no like.
Yeah, there wasn't some over the top reason for that to happen. It just let it happen.
Yeah, it wasn't like a hidden message. Like we just wanted to make a point, and it's like, come on, like. So to me, like part of it was like I'm like I would watch a series with just those two Mandalorians, Bo-Katan, just watch a spinoff on them and like what they're trying to do, and so the characters are so likable. That's what because I remember just watching Captain Marvel in the Avengers franchise and the Marvel franchise, and I remember like she didn't seem like a likable character, and I'm like, I'd rather watch the Black Widow over her. Like I'm like she's a much more entertaining character than her, and it's just like because you were trying to throw it in your face, like, well, she's this independent. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't really need your messaging. Just give me a good product. I'll support you. I don't really need to be messaged to death, I guess is kind of that PC stuff. And I think that's where some of the Marvel stuff went. It was so good. The Mandalorian just kept it so simple, a nice story, no hidden political message embedded in it. And that's what I think people needed. So a refresh from it.
It was excellent. It was excellent. You think back to all the Star Wars content. You think about the prequels, right? Which now, looking back, at the time when the prequels came out, I said, they're okay. I felt like I was a little disappointed with them, but now looking back, I like them now better than at the time. Than I watched them at the time because of those last 3 Star Wars movies that were just so terrible. I thought Rogue One was good, wasn't great. I thought Solo was okay too. But I wasn't blown away. I didn't feel like, oh, this is the Star Wars that I've been waiting for since I was a little kid watching the original movies. After watching Mandalorian, I feel that way again. I feel like, all right, this is the Star Wars that we've been all just kind of waiting for, and we wish the new Star Wars movies had this same kind of tone and the same kind of story. In fact, I wish they just got rid of those 3 new Star Wars movies and created this as like the next episode of 7, 8, 9 or whatever. It's, I mean, what's done is done. I mean, it is what it is, but The Mandalorian is I agree. It's one of those shows that they don't overdo it. The characters are great. There's no political message. I love all that. And maybe the fact too, that it's a short season per se, it's 8 episodes. I mean, some episodes were pretty short. They were like 35 minutes long, right?
That's a little disappointing. That was a little disappointing some days.
It's
kind of bummed out.
Yeah, it's not as much. I mean, but I think maybe that's why it works. Everyone's attention spans are just so short these days that watching these episodes, like they get right into it. There's no like lead up to it. They get right into the episode. You know what's going on. Every episode kind of had its own little thing going, but it always tied a little bit of what was going on to the overall arc of the show.
I agree. I agree.
know?
And I like how they subtly introduced the backstory from the original. Like they touched on stuff that was relevant to the original franchise, the original movies, but they didn't overtly do it. They didn't try to make it an extension of the first three movies, or like not the prequels, but like, you know, they didn't go from Return of the Jedi and kept on referring back to it. They kind of just did their own thing. And it's almost like you listen to The Mandalorian, he's never come across a Jedi. He's not really sure who a Jedi's are. Like this was kind of foreign to him. And it kind of made it more mysterious. Like these guys just didn't really, they were part of the franchise, but they were in their own little universe. They're kind of completely separate from the story. But then they found ways to tie it back in. And it was so well done. It got you so excited. Like I remember when the Boba Fett character first came out, you were like so excited. And they made it work in the story. They didn't overwhelm you with it. He didn't become the new star of the show. He just was a figure in it. So to me, it was just like, it was so well done. And I think you kept on saying it. It was so simple. And I think that was the key to it. They kept it simple and it made it successful. And everything that I've read, like the Jedi franchise was on the ropes after the rise of Skywalker. It was on the ropes because that came out first, and the Mandalorian came out that fall. And the stuff that I've read is basically it's John Favreau. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. Favreau. I don't know.
However you
I don't
pronounce
really know
it.
exactly.
Yeah. However you pronounce it. Him and his partner, they basically revitalized the franchise. Everything that I read is they basically revitalized it to the point there's going to be 10 potential spin-off shows in the franchise now. Like, and now he's not directing all of it, but they basically feel enough energy in it now. They're going to invest that kind of money into the franchise, which is just exciting.
And maybe they know now. Maybe they see this show and they're like, okay, this is the type of show or movies that we have to start creating. We got to think along these kind of lines. We can't be creating the crap that we were creating before. Because the original plan was they wanted to make a Star Wars movie every year. Every year they wanted a new Star Wars movie coming out, right? It was it was all the 3 new Star Wars movies. Rogue One was in there. Solo was in there. They wanted to make sequels to Solo. They were trying to make up all these new Star Wars movies. And then that plan got scrapped. They just said, you know what? That's not going to happen because we're just not getting the same positive feedback from these Star Wars movies that they had hoped. Now with The Mandalorian, you're right. Now they're like, okay, maybe this is the new direction. Instead of having that movie every year, now we could just focus on the streaming part of it and come up with these spin-off shows. They seem to still be very successful. So I'm excited for it. The way The Mandalorian season 2 ended, now, Boba Fett's got his own show, which is actually funny. Boba Fett, for a character who was in the original Star Wars movies so little, right? I mean, he didn't have a lot of screen time. I think I read somewhere it was like a total of like 4 minutes of screen time in all the Star Wars movies. He was such a popular character because he was kind of looked badass, right? Everyone kind of liked the whole like character of him, but they didn't really know enough about him. It took nearly 40 years to bring him back, and everyone's just kind of like excited to see him like on screen or on your TV again. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like that in any character, to have it to be that popular over 4 minutes of screen time and then wait almost 40 years. Now, I know he was a kid in the prequels, whatever, but he wasn't Boba Fett yet. You know what I mean? But this is Boba Fett when he shows up in The Mandalorian.
But it was so cool to see the origin of Boba Fett. I remember in that second movie, that was the cool part about it. You got to see where he came from. So it gave you a little hint. Because he was an iconic character from the original movies. And you're right, he didn't have a lot of role in it, but he was people like him. I mean, like even when you play the Star Wars games, if you play any of the Xbox games or PlayStation, he's a cool character to be. Like if you can be Boba Fett as a character, he's got all the cool toys and weapons. Like he is. Like he's equal to like if you were Darth Vader as a character in one of the games. So anyways, I agree. Like, and I read today, because everybody with the big question was, is that spinoff, is that the next Mandalorian? Is that really season 3 of The Mandalorian? And the director came out and said, no, That's its own show, and there is going to be a Mandalorian 3. So if anybody was wondering, they did come out. I don't know if it was on Good Morning America or what show. Wasn't Favreau, it was his partner came out, and he said no, they're going to be their own independent shows, which is kind of cool. Because that would have sunk if they got rid of the Mandalorian character.
Yeah,
and moved on to Boba Fett.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then Boba Fett I think is coming out first before the Mandalorian season 3.
Now, is that true? Because they're both coming out in December of. I thought they're both coming out. Or are they going to stagger the Mandalorian 3 into 2022 now?
I did hear that they were going to be released around the same time, but I heard production for the Boba Fett show is gonna start first. So they're gonna start production for that first, which leads me to believe that comes out first, and then maybe it's like those intertwine, like the timelines kind of come together. I'm not sure, but I did hear the production will start first, and who knows? Again, it's 8 episodes, so if they go with the same process, it's 8 weeks. I mean, they could release it. What did they said? December of 2021. And then in January, they could release Mandalorian.
That's true. Well, you're right, because I am looking at the notes right now, and the Book of Boba Fett is in production, and the Mandalorian Season 3 is in pre-production. So they haven't even started like recording or doing what they're doing. But again, there are 8 episodes, and a lot of it is CGI kind of stuff. So I can't imagine it takes a lot. But it's the writing that's going to be important. Hopefully they're not going to try to rush the writing. And that's another thing, too, is Favreau directing Boba Fett, the Book of Boba? Who's taking that over?
No, I think he's involved in it. Yeah, I think I read he's involved in it. And the other guy there, Dave Filoni. I think that's how
that's his partner. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other guy that was involved in the animated series, Star Wars, Clone Wars, and Star Wars Rebels. Which now, after watching The Mandalorian, it makes me want to go back and watch the animated shows because I didn't watch any of them. Now I've watched little bits and pieces there. I actually want to find a site that tells me here are the top 10 or 15 or even 20 episodes that you should watch, because they had 7 seasons of Clone Wars and 4 seasons of Rebels, something like that. Like 24 episodes each season. They're short. They're like half-hour cartoons basically. I'm not going to sit there and watch season after season of Star Wars cartoons here, but they released a lot of the information that and a lot of the characters that popped up in The Mandalorian, like Bo-Katan, right? She has this whole backstory that was in Star Wars Rebels, I believe. The dark saber that was used in the show, that was kind of a main piece of, that was like a key part of those animated shows. They had just a lot of backstory, like Ahsoka, the Jedi that popped up in the one episode. She was a main character in both the Clone Wars and Rebels. So it kind of makes you want to find out a little bit of the history of those characters.
Which is interesting because she was the Padawan for Anakin, and the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is going to bring back the original Anakin from the prequels into the show. So it wouldn't be a surprise if they want to try to tie her in, because I think that she's supposed to get her own spin-off series. So Ahsoka might actually get tied into one of those episodes. So not to be a spoiler, guys, but you might see her pop again now that they're producing the Obi-Wan Kenobi series spin-off, and that might be how they tie her in, so that she was a Padawan, and it might explain her. If you watch the animated series and you tie in what happened to Anakin, it would make you understand why she is disenfranchised with the Force, and she is what she is at this point. So it might be a great way of explaining her. So again, The Mandalorian has given us so many more characters, so many opportunities to go in so many different directions, and I'm excited about it. I think it feels like the Marvel franchise. You have something that you can go in a million different directions and develop quality shows. Because I just saw the first commercial for WandaVision coming out for Disney Plus, which is exciting. We won't talk about it right now, but you can look at she's a spin-off. Like, who knew about this character before the Avengers? No one did, and now she was so popular in the show. I mean, in the movie. Yeah, she's gonna get her own show, which it's pretty cool. Like
Yeah.
I'm very excited about
and
it.
and
So,
the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they got their own show. That trailer came out for that as well. It only took we've talked about this before. It only took 2 years for Disney Plus to come out with like content. Finally, some content. You know, we signed up when it first came out, and we're like, where are the shows? Like, what is this? Like, there's the Mandalorian, and that was it. And now at least they've caught up, and now we're like looking forward to some stuff off of that.
Yeah, and I just paid for the renewal, so I'm at least getting my money's worth. I'm excited about it. So
yeah.
So I don't want to take up the whole podcast on the Mandalorian, but we touched on like the future opportunities, and here's the spoiler part. So I guess I just really wanted to touch on this before we move on to go to fantasy football. I had mixed feelings. If you're watching if you watch the episode again, fast forward this if you haven't. It was the most exciting part of that final episode, which was a really good episode, was when that X-Wing fighter showed up. You knew it was going to happen because Yoda reached out with the Force. I mean, not Yoda. I keep calling him Yoda. What's his name?
Grogu.
Grogu reached out with the Force, so you knew
he's still Baby Yoda to me.
Yeah. I don't like the name. Like it's not like Yoda. Grogu. You got it.
Yeah.
But it's gonna take a while to get used to that. But so when Grogu, or AKA Baby Yoda, reached out with the Force, you knew at some point a Jedi was gonna hear it. Now they did it perfect timing. Is when they needed him the most, a Jedi shows up. He shows up in an X-Wing fighter. Then all of a sudden you see the green lightsaber, which
that gave it away.
You got excited, and you're like, oh my God, I can't. And you were like, how are they going to make this work? And they did. They found a way to make it work. But I don't know about you. A part of me was like, that could have been an opportunity to introduce a new Jedi, I guess, and kind of not get stuck with the whole Mark Hamill storyline still. Like, we're still stuck with the Mark Hamill. And I feel at this point, it's time to walk away from Luke, because they took him down a road that you can't really recover. Like, the new movies, it just went off the rails with him. Like, and I don't know if I want them to tie in Grogu, Kylo Ren, and all. I don't want that mess back in. Like, I don't want to try to justify that nonsense. But you could, like, and I guess it makes sense, but.
Yeah, I mean, and I know exactly what you mean. And I don't want them to tie it in with anything from the new Star Wars movies. Unfortunately, I think they will, because I think what Disney is trying to do is they're trying to correct some of those mistakes and fill in some of those parts that just didn't make any sense watching the new movies. And you could tell, like, some parts kind of leading up to this, like, maybe with Luke taking Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, maybe he was one of the casualties when Kylo Ren and whoever's stupid group was that he showed up and killed all the new killing of the younglings, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Yeah. Maybe that's what kind of drove Luke away, like, and turned him into kind of a hermit on this abandoned island. Who knows? Like, maybe that's kind of what they're leading. I don't think Mandalorian season 3 or any season after that, you're not going to see a lot of Luke. I just don't think it's going to be. I don't think they're going to come in and they're going to CGI him and they're going to de-age him. Or, like, I just don't think he's going to be a big character. That's why I do think that moment to bring him at that spot was great, because it pleased a lot of the Star Wars fans, right? I mean, we all got excited to see him on the screen. He had the great scene where he's killing. It was very reminiscent of the Darth Vader scene in Rogue One. I think they did that purposely. There's actually a video out there where you see the scenes side by side, and it almost looks identical. Yeah. But it wasn't like, he did his thing, took Grogu and left. It wasn't like he was a main character throughout the season. I think if they did that, maybe that would have been overkill. But I think now that he's come and gone, it was great. It was great to see him one more time. That's it. I think they're going to move on. Mandalorian season 3 is going to be its own separate thing. Now, whether they bring back Baby Yoda or not, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to bring him back. He's such a money-making machine right now. I mean...
Well, that's what I mean. I feel like they painted themselves back in a wall, because now you got to explain, how did he get away from Luke Skywalker, and how did he reconnect with the Mandalorian? And it could be, they could do a time jump, and now he's older and he's more mature, but he's no longer Baby Yoda then if he's grows, right?
Yeah.
So that takes away some of that lovable, like that character. Like you walk around the mall right now, there's Baby Yoda T-shirts, there's toys. Like he is a
Mm-hmm.
character now. He's like Yoda was. Is it like people want
But
that character?
do you think? Yeah, I just thought of like comparing it to like the Guardians of the Galaxy with Baby Groot. Like, do you think they're gonna do something like that where now it's like teenage Yoda? You know, like he's gonna be a little older, like what Groot was, kind of like. Because if you think about it, if it comes down to merchandising, right? And Disney is their geniuses behind this, right? This is what they do best. They like to make money. They screwed up when the first season came out because they weren't prepared. They had nothing on Baby Yoda. It was like nothing you could buy. It was just like, oh shit, like somebody fucked up. But then they were ready for season 2. They had all sorts of Baby Yoda stuff. Well, they're going to sell all that stuff. Now, when season 3 comes out and they bring back Baby Yoda, are they going to continue to sell Baby Yoda stuff? Or are they going to make them a little older? Now there's a whole new crop of merchandise available that people want to buy. I don't know.
Same. Not the same.
I don't think so either. But I think they're going to look at it and say, okay, we've had our year selling a whole shitload of Baby Yoda stuff. We're not going to sell the same amount the next year. It's just not. Like, we're not going to sell the same amount of Baby Yoda stuff.
I think if he's a key figure in the new, again, the only thing that would save it is they age so slowly, right? Because he is actually old. He's not like a newborn.
Right.
So hopefully they could say, well, it's been 10 years, but he's just a more mature. He doesn't really change. He's just more powerful now. He can control the Force now. Like, whatever. Right? I just don't want it to get cheesy. Like, I don't want Disney to get their hands on it and start now making it cheesy because we want to make a buck. And that's my biggest fear. Like, that would suck.
And this is what usually happens, right? Jon Favreau, who's great, right? He did such a great job with this. He's the guy that helped start Iron Man, and like he's like kind of helped kickstart the whole Marvel franchise. It's when you get greedy executives like that come in, they're like, well, more, and all of a sudden they don't just let you do your job. Like if Jon Favreau came in and was like, just let me do my thing, and they left him alone, I think I have 100% confidence in him to do the great job. But if you get the greedy Disney execs coming in saying, no, we want this, or this, and Jon Favreau disagrees and they say, well, too bad, this is what we want, that's when it could all just implode and just go to shit again.
And that's my fear is we need to save our movies that we produce. We spend a lot of money on them. We want fans to want to reconnect with them, make these shows go to that direction. Let's hope not. Right now, let's enjoy what it was. It was a great. I mean, we spent more time bashing the Star Wars movies, and now we're just so excited about the new Star Wars. So let's leave it on a high note. I think it was awesome. I'm actually, because I'm on vacation for the holiday, I already told my son I'm going to get up in the morning. We're going to binge the entire season 2, right, beginning to end, because you can't really do that with Disney Plus. Let's just binge it. And on a side note, like you touched on something, Big Meat. A lot of the people, if you have kids and you're trying to justify, I really don't want to watch like the Clone War cartoon. Like, I'm an adult. I don't want to sit and do this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have a young kid and he loves Star Wars, but you want him to watch the good stuff, make him watch the Clone Wars. He'll appreciate it. If you like the Mandalorian, they'll appreciate the Clone War story because it'll make more sense to them. So let them watch it. I think they'll enjoy it. And the Clone War cartoon, I did watch it with my youngest son because he was obsessed with Disney and Star Wars. It was really well done. And George Lucas has his hands in it. So it doesn't have that over-the-top Disney polluting it kind of thing.
And it is canon, in case anybody's wondering. It is. They do consider it part of the actual Star Wars story in the universe. It's not, it's not its own little thing that they do, because there's a lot of books written on Star Wars, but not all those books are considered canon, right? You can't just read a story and be like, oh, that's where Han Solo came from. What? No, they're just making up their own story, and they get the rights to use the characters' names or whatever. But those animated stories those animated shows are considered canon. So
and they did take from some of the books. It wasn't like they just took from the cartoon. They did take from some books. And I got to give credit because I know our buddy Antifa Boy, aka Antifa Boy, he really knows this stuff. And one of these days we might have to get him on as a guest. He nerds out, believe it or not, with the Star Wars stuff. He knows the books and knows the characters in a really in-depth way. So he might actually have more insight for the audience on this stuff in the future. So we'll just have to put that on the side burner. All right. I got nothing else to say about The Mandalorian. Watch it. Tap into the Clone Wars. Big Meat's going to do his homework for you guys. He's going to find the key episodes in the Clone War cartoons, and we'll recommend it. We'll keep you guys up to date. And if we hear any more news and how the Star Wars franchise breaks up, we'll keep you guys informed. Any closing thoughts before we move on to fantasy, Big Meat?
No. I again, just whether you're a Star Wars fan or not, Mandalorian was just overall a good show. And you could actually watch it and have never seen any of the Star Wars movies and still walk away being like, wow, that was a pretty good show.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. All right, fantasy. Well, you and I are both eliminated from the fantasy playoffs. It was a cruel way to end.
Unfortunately.
I watched my team implode at the last 3 weeks. I never really recovered, which it's shocking because I lost Will Fuller. Like, who would have thought losing Will Fuller or Antonio Gibson would have ruined my team? But I completely destabilized my team to the point I couldn't even break 60 points.
And Russell Wilson truly fizzled out for you.
You know,
for the first half of the season, he was MVP.
Lights out. And he actually almost, when I drafted the season, if anybody remembers the original, I drafted a team of people I hated and didn't trust. It was all I hate team. And everything I hated about Russell Wilson that I was concerned about what I was complaining about came to life. Like, I saw him like prove me wrong the first few weeks. And then all of a sudden, like a switch went off, and he was terrible. He could, like, all of a sudden, like, the offensive line couldn't protect him. He was getting sacked, rushed, pressured. He was throwing picks now. He wasn't barely scoring. He was barely breaking 15 to 20 points. His best game in the last 6-7 weeks was against the Jets, which is what you would expect to happen, except unless you're Jared Goff, because you're the worst quarterback in the NFL. On one of the best teams in the NFL, but you still can't beat the Jets because you suck as a quarterback. But I was so bummed out how bad he did, and I could have played Baker Mayfield that I picked up off the waiver, and he did better than Russell Wilson at the end of the season. Like, he's a better play right now, more trustworthy than Russell Wilson. It's sad. And so that's what I wanted to gear this episode to, is if you think back to your draft, what is the biggest takeaway that what mistake or lesson did you learn from this draft? Like, when you walked away from this season?
Okay. Yeah. So, but are you asking what mistake that I made, like, for the guys that I drafted, or just kind of a general mistake that you should kind of watch out for? Because I have a couple. I have one of each, actually.
Yeah, it could be a strategy that you thought worked, or a player that you had faith in on this team, and you just learned a lesson. Like, it's fool's gold. Like, whatever it is. Like, I'm just okay. There's a couple of things that I walked away and said, if I could do the draft over, I'll never do this again in a draft. Like, I'll never do this from a team or XYZ. So I just want to throw it out there.
Yes, I have a mistake. One mistake. Yeah. Inviting Antifa to join our league. No, seriously. No, the guy and now in hindsight, I know I do my Jackass Awards every year, right? Looking back now, I would definitely say Julio Jones is like a big mistake. And he was a guy that going into the season, I was like, well, okay, he's still one of the better receivers. Like, he was kind of healthy the last couple of seasons. I know he's a little injury prone, but he still puts up numbers. Doesn't score a lot of touchdowns, but whatever. He's always a top 5 wide receiver. I'm like, I'm going to take him. He missed so many games. He actually hurt his hamstring in game 2 and never really recovered. Like, he would come back in a game, re-injure it, miss the next game, come back the next game, and was like kind of practicing throughout the week. He still didn't score any touchdowns. Even when he was in there, he was catching passes. He was scoring. He was getting a ton of yards. He was doing great. Still not scoring touchdowns, but he just missed so many games, and it's the most games he's missed in a season in his career. So he's not young anymore, right? And the days of taking Julio Jones early in like the first couple of rounds are over. Like, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I am not going to take that guy at the tail end of his career, as talented as he is, and take a risk on him just because it's like, oh, he lasted all the way here. It's like, oh, I didn't think he was going to last here. I'm going to take him. Like, no, there's a reason why he lasted that long. the days of taking Julio Jones high is no more.
Those days are over.
That's my first mistake. A general mistake I would say too, and well, before I get into that, it's not so much a mistake for this year because he was great for me, but buyer beware for next year. Don't count too much on Derrick Henry next year. He was great this year, right? Don't get me wrong. He's a beast. But he isn't very elusive. Like, I do the eyeball test. I've seen a lot of games with him. I see him running. He doesn't make a lot of people miss. It's just when he has an opening and he picks up speed, that's when he does most of his damage. But he did have a lot of carries this year. He had a lot of carries last year. He's due to break down, right? That's kind of the mistake that some people did. We talked about this with CMC and other guys. Like, they break down. He had a lot of carries this year and last year. And like I said, he's a big guy. He's a year older. He kind of lucked out this year. Their offensive line was still solid, even though they lost the guy Conklin in free agency. He was one of the best offensive linemen in the league. They lost the other guy, Taylor Luan. He was like one of the best. He tore his ACL this year, and he still was great. But again, so it just scares me to have Derrick Henry in the team because, like I said, if they just stack the box and rely on Tannehill, who I'm still not 100% confident in, I just don't see Derrick Henry being able to repeat what he's done this year and last year again for a third year in a row. I just don't see it happening. So that would be my buyer beware for next year.
You know, but he does have, and you know, I think about it. He's got that Marshawn Lynch quality about him. He's such a beast when he runs. He barrels through. But to your point, I think Marshawn Lynch was a little bit more elusive.
He was.
Of a back. But I remember he was just, you always wonder that about him. Like, he gets a lot of carries, a lot of abuse. When is he going to break down? And he was there for a long time as a battering ram, and just he lasted a while. So I just wonder, because Henry is such a big physical guy. He's not one of those like skinny running backs that pops out his hamstring every
he's
year.
6'3". He's tall.
Yeah. He's thick. Like, it's funny because I looked at Saquon Barkley and I'm like, wow, he's a big kid. But compared to Derrick Henry is like, it's bigger than him. So, and Saquon Barkley can't stay healthy. So it's just interesting. Those are two good ones. I'm going to give you mine that I guess the thing that I learned, and I should have heeded your warning after the draft. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, no matter who the running back is not a value pick. Like, you can't overdraft just because they're on a great offense, because they have so many weapons between Kelsey, Tyreek Hill, and Mahomes himself, who is like Peyton Manning Jr., greedy. He wants to throw it every time with his stupid little side shuffle passes to Kelsey near the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
I should have known better from what I saw happen to you last year that, like, no matter who the running back was, they just weren't getting the carries. They were not near the goal line. Like, they give them carries. Like, they'll let them march all the way down to the goal line, and then it's Mahomes. It's the Mahomes show, and that was it. So if you're drafting next year, and I paid the price with the Fresh Prince of Hilaire there, I would not do that again. And I don't even care if they draft another running back in his place and say he's a stud. You're kidding yourself, because they just don't care about the running game. The running game is just to allow for some play action and let Mahomes be Mahomes. He's a great quarterback, but it's a fool's venture to draft early. He's worth it if he's like a fourth or fifth round. If you get Hilaire, all right, he's a good number 2. But if you think he's your stud in the first round, good luck to you. Like, that's just
yeah, and then that was one of my things here too, is that there are too many mouths to feed. The Chiefs' offense is too good, whereas you're not going to get a lot of situations where you're within the 5-yard line too, where you're like, oh, I just get the guy to punch it in. Hilaire's not even that big to begin with. They rely on Mahomes rolling out, maybe running it in for a touchdown. You got Kelsey out there. You got a lot of all these weapons where they typically score once they get to like the 20, 15, even 10-yard line. Like, right there, they always find ways to score. You're never going to get those like Tennessee, right, where like Derrick Henry, you're on the 1 yard line. You're going to get those situations where you just plow through and he gets the 1 yard and scores a touchdown. They're just not that good of an offense to score with Tannehill. I mean, Tannehill's been good this year. Don't get me wrong; they have a good enough offense, but they're not a great offense like the Chiefs. You know, if you look back to all the great running backs, thinking back, LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson, right? They never really had great offensive systems, right? I'm trying to remember, like Tomlinson with Phillip Rivers, like he was a good quarterback, but they weren't like leading the league in points. I don't think it was always like Tomlinson. Peterson was the same way.
Michael Falk is the only example of a guy that had Kurt Warner, had a great offense, but they used Marshall Falk as the receiving back. He was like
receiving back, yeah. He always had like 1,000 yards receiving, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't your typical at that time. It was unique to have such a receiving back like him. Like so, he broke the mold. But you're right. I think a lot of people that have great backs, you don't usually have both. Because look at even with Aaron Jones with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Aaron Rodgers does not, if he can throw the ball and get a touchdown, he's throwing it. He'd rather throw it than let it run in. Like, that's just how he is. It's a quarterback. It's like, it's crazy because it's still a quarterback league. Like, it's still driven by quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the funny thing. So this is lesson number 2. And I poor Mr. Roper has paid the price for this twice now. And we all pay the price for this a little bit. Taking a quarterback so early, and I know fantasy experts say it, and I'm a big believer, like quarterbacks give you so much points every week. But what I've learned, like watching Mr. Roper, taking Patrick Mahomes early, it cripples your draft if you take him in the second round, right? If you take a quarterback so early, it seems like it cripples your ability to get depth, like because now you're scrambling. You need to get that like number 1 receiver, that number 1 or 2 running back, or whatever you need at the time. And I've watched 2 seasons him fizzle out. I took Russell Wilson early. We watched Lamar Jackson get taken early. All these guys. What do they do to the fantasy teams? No one's winning it with those guys, right? The only guy that's winning it, you got Rodgers that Jarvis took later in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Allen, who was taken later in the draft, right? So I guess the lesson learned is just sometimes like these big names, they require high capital, but sometimes you can find a good guy off the waiver. Because I remember like when Mute Boy, he picked up Wentz when it was his best year. And all of a sudden he had this monster year because Wentz was having his best year. Yeah. Or you pick up Matt Ryan in one of his freak years where he's having his ridiculous numbers. Those are guys late. You could have picked up Roethlisberger this year. Now, the second half, he sucked. But the first half, he would have carried your team all the way because he was killing it in the first half of the year. So I guess I'm starting to wonder, man, maybe my strategy of – now, you don't want to do what you did, end up with Cam Newton as your number 1. But you ended up getting Tom Brady.
No, Tom Brady was my number 1.
Tom Brady was your number 1. But again, you got him later in the – you probably made the smarter decision. You waited later in the rounds.
Yeah, I took him right after Jarvis took Rodgers. But no, I hear what you're saying. But however, that's also come back to bite me over the years as well, because I've had that same kind of mindset. I'm like, I'm not taking a quarterback. I used to take a quarterback early. Like early when we first did this, it was like no, I'm taking my Kurt Warner. I'm taking like the guys early. Like those are the guys I want. But I've changed over the years where I'm like, you know what? Because the league has had more and more quarterbacks develop, right? There's more quarterbacks just putting up big numbers. There's just so many out there. So I wait and I wait and I wait. And sometimes I wait a little bit too long. And I waited.
There's a caveat. You can't wait too long. Like 4th or 5th round is starting to push. You got to go make your move. But the early 2nd, early 3rd may not be worth it.
Too early. It's too early. Yeah. Yeah. Because I really wanted Kyler Murray this year. I would have been happy with Rodgers. Like when those guys were taken, I liked Russell Wilson. He was also taken. When those guys were gone, I said, okay, the last guy I like on the board is Tom Brady. I don't like anybody else. I don't feel comfortable enough to take anybody else. Who knew Josh Allen was going to become what he is today?
We talked about him getting Stephon Diggs, and he was. But they changed their philosophy completely.
They did.
They went away from the running game.
Yes,
they went to a passing offense.
Like, And who knew? Who knew that was the case? Yeah. And that's why Diggs left Minnesota. Well, he wanted to leave Minnesota because their run first mentality. He wanted to go to and now I'm like reading all this stuff. Like, where was all this back before the season started? Nobody was talking about that Buffalo was going to turn into this passing type offense. But, he's the one guy that like emerged that was like, oh, nobody really saw that coming.
Yeah.
But so in a way, it's like, yeah, don't take a quarterback too early, but don't wait too long either, because you guys, you got to get those Mahomes huge games. Russell Wilson, at least for the first half of the year, was doing great. Yeah, let's go back to Russell Wilson. I mean, he was MVP after the first half of the season. Now, I don't even think he's going to get another vote. He's never had an MVP vote. I still don't think he's going to get an MVP vote, because they're all going to go to either Mahomes or they're going to go to Rodgers. One of those two. Maybe even Josh Allen. Josh Allen will get a bunch of votes. I don't get why
Josh Allen turned Buffalo around. How is he? He doesn't have a lot of weapons other than Diggs. You got to say Cole Beasley is his big weapon. Just Diggs and Allen. His running backs are mediocre. So how is he not MVP versus Rodgers, who has Devontae Adams, one of the at least top two receivers in the league, right? If you want to argue Tyreek Hill, Devontae, I don't care. You can go either or. And then you have Aaron Jones as a good running back, decent. He balances the team. But Rodgers has weapons. So how is he MVP? And why is Mahomes MVP? He's got great receivers, one of the best tight ends, or if not the best tight end in the NFL. Why is he the MVP? Like, he's winning with talent. Josh Allen is basically carrying a bum team and carrying them on his back. Like, Josh Allen, when he has a bad game, the whole team sucks. Like, it's just...
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it might even just come down to these last two games. Who knows? I mean, to see exactly what how they finish the season. But you're right. I think it's a 3-man race. I think those are the three guys that are going to win.
I would vote Allen. I think I think you're giving it to Rodgers because he's the big name, and you're giving it to Mahomes because he's like the face of the NFL, the young face of the NFL, and Rodgers is now the older, like the Tom Brady face of the NFL, like the statesman of the NFL. Where you should give it to an up and coming kid, like in Buffalo, because if they win, it's shocking to me. I'm hearing all these people talk about Mahomes and Rodgers. I'm like, how are you guys skipping Allen? But Russell Wilson, such a disappointment, and so that was the third lesson I learned from this big meet is sometimes you don't pivot off players out of stubbornness. Like, you keep playing the same guy, even though in your gut tells you the matchup sucks. The quarter, like, he's not playing that well, but it's the name. Like, oh, he's gonna have that breakout game, and you look at it, and then when he fails, you're like, what was I thinking? Why did I keep? Like, I should have known everything about the way Wilson has been playing against good defenses. It should have told me I should have benched him for this playoff game. So I go and I picked up insurance policies. I picked up Baker Mayfield. I picked up Jalen Hurts from Philadelphia. And everybody said they had such great upside games. And I was so stubborn in my like, I was like, no, I drafted this guy. This guy brought me here. I'm playing him. And you know what? With fantasy, being loyal to any player is the dumbest thing in the world. Because everything is week to week and in that moment. So holding on to a guy and playing him over and over again, knowing that he sucks, you're just doing it out of stubbornness. Like, and you're afraid to drop him, and you're like, no, he's gonna. And then he eventually has that one big game, and you like get excited, and you plug him back in, and then he sucks again, and you're like, I'm learned after this season, I don't care who brings me to the playoffs. I'm playing the person with the best matchups, who's hot, who's on fire. You can't just hope for the best that this guy's going to turn it around in the playoffs. Like, it's the worst time to hope for the best when you have other viable options. Lesson learned.
I've made that mistake before. I hang on to players a little bit too long because of their name. But at the same time, you when you do move away from those players and you lose because you benched your star player and he ends up having a great game, you think back like, the hell was I thinking? I benched my star player, like, and he ended up busting out and have a big game. It could come back to bite you a little bit too. But I hear what you're saying.
How often does it happen?
I know, but it's your guy. It's your guy that you draft. It's like you kind of sink or swim with him. It's like if you're gonna go down, you're gonna go down with this guy because he's the guy that you invested a lot in. And it's hard. It's hard to bench those guys. I understand. There are times I wanted to bench Tyler Lockett. and I didn't. And I wish I did, because he didn't do anything the last 7 games. It just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
And I was like, who else did I have in there? I mean, I ended up having to drop a bunch of guys that I actually liked because I needed a tight end at one point. Like both of my tight ends were either injured or had COVID. I was like, I need to play a tight end, so I had to drop one of my receivers to get him. It just, yeah, it's a yeah. I would agree. I would agree with that a little bit, but at the same time, it's like,
Yeah, but
it's tough to bench one of your stars. Like
You're
Russell
holding on.
Wilson would have been tough to play Jalen Hurts over Russell Wilson. That's a tough call.
Well,
That's a
I
tough
gotta tell,
call.
and Mr. Roper can vouch for me. If I made it to the finals and I had Baker Mayfield against the Jets, I was playing Baker Mayfield over Russell Wilson against the Rams, because I watched Russell Wilson only put up 9 points against the Rams. It was a disgrace. He proved my point. Like, I should have just benched him, because he doesn't do well with good pass. Like, your eyes tell you. You see it. Like, if you follow football, you see it with your own eyes. Like, you almost like lie to yourself.
Yeah.
Like no, he's gonna figure it out, and they don't. And you're like, well, what was I thinking? So sometimes, like, I give Jarvis credit. He has no loyalty to players. He will trade them away with no like loyalty that he drafted them and talk type. He'll get rid of them, swap out a team, and benefit his team, because he has no like loyalty to anybody other than Rodgers.
Sure, but he got eliminated because he got a little too cute with his team, because he picked up, who was that guy, Komet as a tight end instead of playing the guy who's been playing all season long and Goddard. Now Goddard only got him a couple more points, but he could have used those 2 points. And then he picked up New England's defense. He had 2 perfectly good defenses on his team that he already had. He would have ended up winning if he just played one of those 2 defenses instead of playing New England's defense. He also put in Akers before he put in Melvin Gordon. So it's kind of like,
well, Akers was hot. You can't. He was hot. He was, and he was going against the Jets. So in reality, like, he was looking at the matchup and saying, the Jets are terrible. They got killed the week before. I'm going to play the matchup. So, but again, you give him credit. He's fearless.
I think he overanalyzed it. I think he overanalyzed it, and it came back to bite him. I would just say one other thing too, just to go back to like the mistakes or the kind of the lessons learned, and this kind of relates to what you said about CEH too. I would say going into next year, I mean, and for every year, don't buy into the hype, right? You don't believe the hype from all these fantasy football shows, these websites, these magazines. They hype certain players, kind of like CEH, right? Because they're like, oh, he's like, Damian Williams opted out because of COVID, so like CEH is going to be the man. He's going to be great. If they're unproven, if if they're running behind a poor offensive line, if the team has like too many mouths to feed, like Kansas City, make your own judgment, on whether it's worth taking them or not. You got to kind of factor a lot of those into it. Just don't read what all the experts are saying and say, oh yeah, that guy's going to be great. Because look what happened to a lot of the players in the first couple of rounds this year. Not a lot of players. I think I said this before our season here, but everyone was talking up Godwin. Like, Chris Godwin's going to have this monster year because Brady likes to throw to the slot guy, and Mike Evans was kind of like disappeared. It was like he wasn't even like the top 20 receivers in some of these like mock drafts. And what happened? Mike Evans ended up having a much better year than Godwin. I know Godwin was hurt here and there, but it's just the same thing. It's just like, don't buy into all this hype that everybody's saying, because it messes with your mind. You start reading this stuff and you're like, oh yeah, that's the guy I'm going to take high. Use your own judgment. Think about it. Is the guy good? Is he proven? Does he play in a good team? Is he a running back that's playing around behind a good offensive line? You just gotta think about all those things instead of just kind of reading what the magazines say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree, and that brings us to my buddy Joe Mixon. Every year they hype up Joe Mixon. This will be the year. It's just like hyping up a Patriots running back. There's one thing that we've known over the last decade. There's no good Patriots running back. There never will be. It's just not part of their scheme. Stop. Get over it. There will never be this dominant Corey Dillon running back in the Patriots. Like, was it Antoine Smith right before Corey Dillon? was
Yeah.
but he wasn't great. But
Even
he was a hell
him
of a,
was like, okay, yeah.
yeah, he was, but he was still better than what we've gotten over the last 10 years. There's never been. So stop believing go with your eyes. If your eyes tell you, wait a minute, I've never seen this before. All of a sudden, it's going to change.
Maybe like Garrett Blunt, like his 1 year, he had like 12 touchdowns or whatever. But like, yeah, even him didn't rush for a lot of yards.
No,
You're
he was falling in the end zone. He was just falling in the end zone because they were a good offense that moved the ball. He wasn't always their first option, but he was like he just could. And now you have like someone like Cam Newton who just kept on falling over the goal line, which is, again, that's another side story with Cam Newton. Yeah, so there's a lot of lessons that I walked away saying, if your gut is gnawing you, saying this doesn't feel right, this is wrong. Sometimes your gut is right. Sometimes your gut's telling you like, hey, something's not right. Don't look at the stars on Yahoo or whatever you have. Don't listen to the experts because they don't know don't listen to their fearless forecast. They're guessing. I can give you a fearless forecast. Go with your gut. Like if your gut tells you this guy doesn't play well against this team, go with your gut. Like just, I don't care what the experts say. It's just
it's
frustrating. It's frustrating to lose, and it's frustrating when you have in your mind, I should have made these changes. I knew I should have made these changes. I wanted to bench this guy, but I talked myself out of it. Like you talked me out of playing, what's his name, Wilson from the Saints. So I ended up putting David Johnson. Now David Johnson ended up scoring a couple more points, but my gut told me like Houston's terrible. Like they're just so one-dimensional sometimes. But luckily for me, they were just feeding the ball to him in the air. He didn't score any touchdowns, but they kept on feeding the ball. But Wilson ended up scoring a touchdown. I'm like, damn it, I should have just went with my gut. It felt right. It felt better than that schmuck. And it didn't matter. Part of me was like, I wish I just benched CH. I was actually, a side note, I was actually in the supermarket, and I got the alert that Ezekiel Elliott was out. I ran to my phone, and I couldn't get a good signal. I'm like, I'm picking up Pollard. I need a running back. I don't trust my running backs. And I talked myself out of it. I was running because I wasn't getting a signal. I was going to run out the store. I left everything. I left my cart. I'm running out of the market to go get a signal. I'm like, come on, damn it, refresh before someone picks him up. And then I said to myself, are you really going to pick up a guy off the waivers, throw him in a playoff game just because Elliott went down? Yeah. And he had a monster game. And I'm like, I talked myself into playing Hilaire in a bad matchup, knowing everything was wrong. I talked myself out of it instead of just picking up Pollard and going with my gut that said, get him. I left my groceries to make this, and I said, forget it. So stupid.
Oh, that's great. I could just picture you in the supermarket, just leaving the cart, just running out the door. People probably watching you like.
It was crowded because everybody was trying to get out for the football game started. I almost knocked over like people. So
what would have been funny if it was like a group of guys like running out at the same time, trying to get signal, trying to pick up Pollard in their own league. Like what's going on? Where's the fire? Like, oh no, I'm just trying to pick up Pollard. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you know what? I damn it. Yeah. So another rule of thumb: if you're not going to be around kickoff, try to be in the area with good cell coverage. Whatever activity you're doing, make sure you're near cell coverage because you don't want to miss those damn opportunities to make that last second move because you couldn't get a signal and you're like a psychopath running out of the market. I'm glad I found my carriage, and luckily I didn't have my kids because I might have actually left the kids to go make the move, but luckily I was by myself making some quick stuff, picking up some stuff before the game started, before I camped out. But anyways, long podcast, long overdue, but we covered a lot of topics. Hopefully people found it educational. Not filled with a lot of inside jokes. We're kind of moving away from a lot of the inside jokes. We like to keep it, but we're trying to grow our audience. So we're gonna go back to our roots and have fun, but not focus too much on Antifa boy and COVID boy and and all the other nonsense.
And Mute Boy and
Mute Boy, R3
Cockroach and R3 and
yeah. And then they stopped listening because we insulted him so much. They stopped listening. Yeah. So we got to bring him back. The Raccoons. He's a loyal fan. All right. Any closing thoughts, Meat, before we wrap it up?
No, not really. Just like we said, just a recap. Just enjoy your Manhattans and watch The Mandalorian.
All right.
Nothing could be better than sitting back with a nice, delicious Manhattan on the rocks, ice cold, watching The Mandalorian.
All right. Well, I can safely say we'll probably have a podcast next week after Christmas because Wonder Woman's coming out, and it's groundbreaking because it's going to be the first movie ever released in the theaters and free for HBO Max customers at the same time. Is this the new format moving forward in the future?
I was going to say, you have HBO Max, right?
I do. So
I might have to come over in my my hazmat suit and sit and watch it with you.
Yeah, you're gonna have to sit away like at least 12 feet away from me. So we'll have to watch it. But my wife has already said Christmas morning, if it's downloaded for Christmas morning, we're gonna get up, have breakfast with the kids, do our thing, and we're watching Wonder Woman that morning. So
forget it then. I won't be joining you on Christmas morning. Then.
No.
Sorry, can't be doing that. But I might come over. Maybe the next day if if you're not home, that's okay. Just leave the door unlocked. I'll come in.
Well, the weather is warm. I'm welcome to have you. I'll put you out in my slider outside. I'll keep the door open. You can watch the TV from outside. We'll just keep it so it's socially distant. So
well, you don't want me sitting on your couch watching Wonder Woman.
Yeah, no,
sure.
I don't.
You do not want that.
No, I don't want you actually anywhere near my.
I was planning on watching Wonder Woman just in my underwear, but
Yeah, I don't think my wife will be happy if she sees you dropping your pants before the movie starts. So, all right, but yeah, we'll definitely have to do a download of Wonder Woman, and if it lives up to the hype, because there's a lot of hype on this, and we'll see how it goes. All right, folks, have a Merry Christmas, and hopefully we'll catch up next week.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Talk to you later, big mate.